Welcome into this week's episode of the HighSchoolOT Press Box. It is October 19th, 2025. We're into the final weeks of the high school football season, and we are closing in on the thick of the high school sports playoffs here in North Carolina for the fall season, both NCHSAA and NCISAA. Evan Moesta and J. Mike Blake here with you recording this week's episode. Let's dive right into playoffs because we got brackets for girls tennis almost a little over a week ago, about 10 days ago. And then this past Thursday, we received NCHSAA volleyball brackets. At the time of recording here on the 19th of October, we've already played round one matches for volleyball. But I think it's been our first look at what the new landscape is with 8 classifications, what playoffs look like with 8 classes. And it's drawn a lot of mixed reviews. It's naturally, when there's something that you've never seen before, you're going to be a little bit apprehensive to what it looks like. But we got our first look at how many teams make the playoffs. First of all, there have never been this many teams making a postseason before, and there are a lot of mixed opinions about that. And also, we've gotten a first look at RPI only for seeding. And if you don't know what that means, is in the past, yes, they determined playoff brackets based on your RPI the last 4 years. But conference standing also mattered, where you were getting in by order that you finished in your conference, and there would be rules pertaining to tiebreakers and conference standing and all of that. Now it is just straight RPI. Who are the best teams? Does not matter. And I think it was done by, this was put into place because there's so many split conferences, and the biggest headache over the last couple of years had always been seeding playoffs and the frustration of leagues that are in, or teams that are in split conferences getting rewarded against teams in solo classification conferences, and they were seeded the same. And you would have instances where there would be home playoff games for teams that were in a split conference and maybe finished third in that league, and you have second place teams in a conference having to travel there on the road in the first round of the playoffs and then dominate these split class teams. So that's gone. It is all RPI. But one of the downsides, I think, to this is because it's RPI only, you're going to get teams seated ahead of teams that it finished behind in the conference standings. And there have been several of those that have happened so far, and people have been very vocal about it. I know there's a couple of instances in the 1A volleyball playoffs where this was the case. Obviously, out in the mountains in 5A, you had Franklin and West Henderson. West Henderson swept the regular season series. Franklin took the conference tournament championship match, and Franklin got seeded higher than West Henderson. And so people are sitting around looking and saying, is it fair that a team that finished behind another team head to head in a conference, season, is it fair for them to be seated behind because it's RPI only? Or do we look at this and say, you know what? RPI only outweighs all of the downsides that came with dealing with seeding playoffs in split conferences. What's your take on this, J. Mike?
My take is there are too many positives the way we're doing it to go back. And I also want people to understand we're not going back. Like there's no, show me the example of where playoffs get expanded and then a few years later they're like, wow, too many teams, let's cut back. It doesn't happen in the pro sports level. It doesn't happen in college, and it will not happen in high school. So I've had to accept a lot of things that I used to not really be okay with when it comes to our 8 classification world. One of those is I wanted making the playoffs to be an honor. I have to give that up now. Okay, if you're in 1A and you play tennis, you're in the playoffs every year unless you decline it. Okay, if you're in 2A and play football, you're in the playoffs every year unless you decline it. Don't hang a banner for that. But the trade-off is the bracket looks great. The top seeds are seeded very appropriately. Yes, you have your instances where, hey, didn't this team sweep this other team? And one's a 2 and one's a 3. And what if they play each other? Okay, if there's one fix there, you play each other in the playoffs. There's a clear tiebreaker. Maybe you have to switch who's the host school, even though you can keep your seed. Maybe something like that. The other pro that I do not want to go back on is that both playoff brackets we've had so far, girls tennis and volleyball, were done by like 11 and 11:30. The entire thing done. Not the first draft done. Not we have our revised brackets out and we are hours away. We used to start at like 10. Now we are finishing.
And we wouldn't get them to, yeah, we wouldn't get them till 5 in the evening
because of the tiebreakers and every conference having to do its own tiebreaker and figure this out and submit this. And sometimes they submit it the wrong way because let's face it, as much as I follow high school sports and a lot of other people do, and we have this thing down to a science in our heads. Some ADs just got the job a couple months ago, and they're kind of looking at each other like, isn't this how you do it? This is how we did it 4 years ago. Well, yeah, maybe this is how we do it. But the rules have changed so much every single year. This is the cleanest way to do it. The pros outweigh any cons. And I hate to say that because I was somebody who said, it should be an honor to make the playoffs. 8 classifications. I'm giving up on it. And I think that's just what we're going to have to accept, okay, is that, yes, too many teams will make the playoffs. But you know what? The people who are complaining now about too many teams making the playoffs seem to be the kind of people that complained about, oh, I can't believe this team got in over this team. Like you would spend hours fighting on Twitter about who the number 32 seed really should have been. So you're the reason why we're here. You're the reason why we had just let everybody else in because we were spending so much time fighting over who the last team was. You say, you know what? Too many is better than too few. And that's a truism about high school sports playoffs that is spreading throughout a number of states. And North Carolina, again, we're not going back to the old days where you had to finish top 2 in your conference or else you were not getting in the playoffs. Those days are long, long gone, or top 3 or top 4. Now, if your conference doesn't get everyone in, man, that must have been a really bad team at the end. Like, accept it. Don't hang a banner for getting to the playoffs. The first round of volleyball playoffs and girls tennis playoffs had very few interesting games. Very few interesting.
That was a downside. I mean, I said this if you're a high school OT insider, I had a volleyball preview, and typically most years I just like geek out and write all these like little tiny, analysis of stuff. It's not really fun anymore until the 3rd, 4th round of the playoffs, which stinks. Mm-hmm. Some of these buys, everybody's got a buy in it, but again, it's going to take some getting used to. But you're right. We don't have that argument anymore of, man, my team worked really hard and it played in a tough league and I hate that we got punished for this and that. And I can't believe it. Like, look, rarely did I ever side with those people who were whining and complaining about not getting the 32 seed, because at that point you either have like a 500 to below 500 record, and so much of this was on you if you didn't make the playoffs because of either how you scheduled or how you performed in certain games. No team ever missed the playoffs that beat everybody that they should have and could have beat. But you know what? We're here now. This is what it looks like. I think an interesting takeaway from the volleyball one is the Catawba Shores Conference down around Davidson County, the northwestern part of Mecklenburg County. You have Community School of Davidson. They got the number 1 seed in the 2A West. You've got Pine Lake Prep in that conference who finished 3rd. They got the number 1 seed in the 3A West. And you've got Lake Norman Charter, who won that league, finishing as the 1 seed in the 4A West. That is 3 teams from one conference getting 3 1 seeds in 3 different classifications. Yeah. Absolutely incredible for that league. It was said on Twitter when the brackets came out on Thursday, but like, of course we've never seen this happen before, but like, I don't think that's going to be a regular thing that occurs. I think that's actually unique in the fact that it happened on one of the very first brackets is wild to me. But yes, we have to recalibrate our minds. Typically, that first round of volleyball playoffs on that Saturday, historically, I've loved that day because you can go drive all around the state and you can catch games from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. and you can catch 4 or 5 different matches, and it's great. I went and covered NCHSAA, and that's nothing against any of the teams that had first round playoff matches on Saturday, but like, it's just not eventful these first couple rounds. And I think we're going to get a lot of blowouts in round 2 on Tuesday. It's going to be interesting, but we all have to kind of recalibrate our minds here.
And I think it'll vary by sport and it'll vary by bracket. So when soccer brackets come out, I'm looking at 8A in particular. I'm like, man, they're jumping right into it in the first round or the second round, especially at 8A boys soccer. But in others, you're like, okay, maybe it'll be second or third round. Again, is that the worst thing for the top teams to ease into the playoffs? not really. Also, in the past, when we had some teams getting buys, it would be like 4. It almost makes it more fair for 8 to get it because some coaches don't like buys. But hey, if all the other top teams are getting a bye week too, we're all kind of on the same page.
Yep.
The other thing that I think we need to talk about is I remember the coaches wanted to tweak RPI, and I was like, hey, from what Joel Bryant did, it showed that it wasn't going to change too much with the formula. But be careful what you wish for. I haven't done the math, but tinkering with that could backfire. It seems like it actually made very little change, or if there was a negative change, it's been outweighed by the fact that we don't have the protected 1 seeds. There were some conferences where everyone had to play in the first round. And you know what? That made sense. And you know what? Every conference champ easily made the playoffs. We don't have to worry about all that automatic qualifiers. Every conference tournament champ was already making the playoffs. All these things are taken off the table. And it makes, prognosticating, oh, yeah, here's the rules you have to remember, building a bracket makes that less complex, which for me, I mean, for the last 15 years, I've kind of made it a thing to know the rule book really, really well on who makes the playoffs. Now it's kind of out the window. But again, I like these brackets. I like the way you get the brackets quick. I like looking at the top seeds and saying that makes sense. Like those are the best teams. And okay, I think one thing that could change, Evan, is that the way volleyball does their first round of the playoffs on Saturday, and the brackets come out on like a Thursday, and the season ends on a Wednesday. Every sport should try that. Should try and work to end the season a few days earlier, get brackets on Thursday, play the first round Saturday. Because if there is a kind of a bad game or a blowout game, you want it to be on a weekend day or not a school night. And then, okay, school night, Tuesday night, here comes the better games, right? Or here comes the better games on Wednesday, whatever the case may be. Also, I just think it works a lot better for a lot of coaches. There's a lot of other sports that don't like getting the brackets on Monday and playing Tuesday. Basketball coaches have, or football coaches have already kind of looked at the schedule this year. Like, wait, we're getting brackets when? And we're having to play the first round when? I think for volleyball, it kind of works out the best.
I do think the NCHSAA showing that it can get brackets out so quickly is a great indication that I don't think we're going to be getting football brackets on Monday. I don't want to set that in stone and speak because I don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the NCHSAA on any of these decisions, but it feels like they set that Monday not knowing how it was going to look, and now that they've put they have 2 in their back pocket, they're going to have a third coming up with soccer. I think by the time we get to the announcement of football playoffs, I think it's going to be kind of ironed out to the point where we could probably get them on Saturday.
Yeah, if I'm the NCHSAA, I'm aiming for Saturday. The only thing that I think the only thing that would make me hesitant on that, if I'm them, is wasn't it last year or maybe the year before where Wallace Rose Hill and James Keenan had some incident at a game, and then it caused the game to be stopped, and they had to finish it Saturday morning. That's the only thing. But because particularly,
and you can throw a tinfoil hat on right now and say Halloween night rivalry games last week of the season, like. Surely something might bleed over into Saturday, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I would. The other good thing is there's right now something like 40 games that are scheduled for October 30th, a Thursday.
Yes. Man, if you're an athletic director or a football coach, like go put your game on that Thursday. Your RPI can be done with. Everything can kind of be in the bank. You want that extra day of prep. You can almost get that. Like, help yourself play that Thursday. You don't have to deal with the crazy Halloween crowds on that Friday night. Like,
you don't have to fight
in some cases
crowds to come to you either. Like, people don't have to choose trick or treating or football game. They can go to both.
And in some cases, as an athletic director, you might have a cross country or a tennis or a volleyball team that's having to participate in a Friday or a Saturday state championship.
Yeah.
So
and
it could be a lot easier.
I've heard from ADs in the past. I mean, this is like a decade ago. Like Halloween night in certain areas, not all, but it's tough to kind of actually staff a football game because you have a lot of people who run concessions or they take tickets or they work security who they're like, hey, I've got little kids. I can't be here. Or, I have this, I'm promised I would take them to this little trunk or treat thing. And all of a sudden it makes it hard. I've even seen games, JV football games moved back and say it's on a Thursday. Howie's on a Thursday 1 year. They'll move it back to Wednesday just to get the game and not have to worry about staffing issues. So that's another thing working in favor of it. But yeah, with the whole brackets, seeing them come out I know there are people who are going to say, I can't believe there's too many teams and everyone gets a trophy. I get it. I'm one who I never cried with the 10 and 14 basketball team that got left out, but only one team gets the trophy, guys. Let's be real. It's the state champ. And
I've said it on previous episodes, and I'll say it again. This is not a who deserves it or who has the easiest path off. This is a playoff to determine the best team in the state of North Carolina in each classification. So
yeah,
I can. We've done this enough, J. Mike. I can promise anybody who has their thoughts about these brackets. I promise you, on this episode, October 19th, 2025. I promise you, from now through the end of the spring, it's all going to work itself out.
Yeah,
the best teams are going to separate itself and win the state championship. I promise you, it will work out.
I'll say this: as long as the 1 through 8 makes sense, not that you would agree, disagree, or there might be something you would flip. As long as the 1 through 8 makes sense, I think it's doing a great job. Because
there are only 2 volleyball teams in the entire state of North Carolina that played on Saturday that at the beginning of the season, I was like, man, they're a state championship contender. Both were actually in the same classification, 4A, which is the wildest toss-up right now. And it was Brevard and Carrboro. And truthfully, they didn't have the best regular seasons by their standards. So it wasn't even a flaw in the system. It was more they tripped up a couple times during the season when they shouldn't have. But they're still 2 very talented teams that had to end up playing on Saturday.
I would be interested if anyone. I'd be interested if anyone in any of the fall sports. I think boys soccer is the most likely because soccer playoffs are crazy. If anyone who has to play in that first round makes it to a state championship game, we're going from a time where we've had teams that are seeded 20th and below making it to state title games with the new RPI and not protecting the split conferences and all the conference champs and everything. The seeding makes more sense. Now we're just like, wow, could someone 9 or lower make it to a state championship game? That's an interesting question because
I wonder if we could go back and dig up those RPIs from 2023 when South Mecklenburg became their boys soccer team, became the lowest seeded NCHSAA team to ever win a state championship. I wonder if we could go back and dig up those RPIs and sort them by the new style, because they would not have been the 26th seed had that been the case. South Mech would have probably been a team that was in that maybe 11 to 14 range rather than 26. But again, you go back and you ask that South Mech team, did you think you were a top 10 seed during the regular season? Their answer was no, they weren't. They weren't the best version of themselves. They slipped up. They tripped up like maybe a Carrboro or a Brevard that I just referenced to. So, yeah, I think if Carrboro or Brevard ends up in Winston-Salem or Raleigh in a state title, I'm not going to be shocked. But we're not going to have these instances anymore where it's going to be a team that's not in the top 8 or 10.
Yeah, it's going to be so rare. Even it's so advanced from where it used to be. People forget, like it was like a decade ago. We're doing win-loss percentage with no regard to how strong your conference was. So if you went 500, you might get left out because somebody else just happened to play in an easy conference or beat up on the nearby rivals who are not as good. So we've come a long way. Before we move on to the next section, I remember that South Mex team. I remember like texting you. I saw them play against Weddington, and I said, I think I just saw the 4A state champ. I was definitely talking about Weddington, though. But I was in the right neighborhood. I was literally in the right spot, but just picked the wrong team.
I'm going to leave this thought here as we transition into the next topic. The one thing that this isn't, and I've seen this from a lot of people on social media, moving to 8 classifications, allowing this many teams into the playoffs, what it is not is a cash grab. Right. Q Tucker is not, I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. Q Tucker is not in Chapel Hill right now, spinning around in her throne, fanning out wads of cash, counting it up as she has 8 classifications now across all sports. Personnel-wise, like if this is all about money for the NCHSAA, then it's not a good business decision doing what they're doing, because they don't have the resources and the personnel that I think they would want to be able to conduct these championships. This move to 8 classifications was voted on and determined and asked for by its member schools of the NCHSAA.
Yeah.
So if you're mad about this and you think it's Q Tucker with her fist in the, like over top of the whole state and just wanting to rule and make as much money as she can possibly make for the NCHSAA, what you need to do is you need to go down to your athletic director or your principal that voted in favor, or I guarantee you there's a school around yours right now that voted in favor of moving to A
Oh,
classifications. And there are
90%
some,
chance. Yeah.
yes, and there are some schools out there that really benefited from this move to A classifications, because there are a lot of schools, especially in 4A, where quite frankly their athletics could not compete in a loaded 4A. I look at Watauga as a athletic program that really benefited from this. I look at Grace Creek as one that did. In the 5A, like I don't want to say hope. That's bad. I'm not picking sides here, but like Hickory and Cedar Ridge is going to be an awesome 5A volleyball state championship if we get it. Those two teams in 3A, it was very congested the last couple of years, and now it's sorted out where a team like Cedar Ridge and a team like Hickory has a really nice path to a state title because of the 8 classification. So I don't think it's as much of a quote unquote cash grab as this is, it's more pure to the mission of wanting to provide opportunities for student athletes. But you also have to remember here, yes, the NCHSAA is going to bring in a little bit more money, quote unquote, from hosting more state championships and more playoff events, but also you're doubling the amount of facilities, you're doubling the amount of state championships, you're increasing the amount of staff that you're going to need for these state championships. You're paying a lot more out of pocket to be able to conduct 8 state championships. So in a way, it does cancel itself out. And again, a lot of these schools, as you had mentioned in a previous episode, I believe it was our last episode, a lot of these schools are going to get this money back.
Yeah.
So the NCHSAA is about as on mission as they have ever been.
For people that don't know, and by the way, Saturday volleyball, I guarantee a lot of host schools lost money. Because
not great crowds.
Not great crowds, because it's not the road team is not bringing a lot of fans, because sometimes the road team's records is like, oh, we thought we didn't even know we were making the playoffs. But you have to divide the playoff check basically 3 ways: visiting team, home team, and NCHSAA. And then the home team still has to pay the refs. But you do get some back at the end of the year. The association kind of cuts a check based on playoff travel and things like that, kind of reimburse you, but it's reimbursed in like July or June. So that's that part. The other thing is, like not only did 8 classifications pass, folks, it passed with 90% of the vote. 90. Okay. You got 90% of principals, athletic directors telling their principals how to vote across the state, saying we want 8 champions in every sport. So this isn't, and the vibes that we've gotten from the association all leading up to this year, we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to, they voted for it, but like, I wouldn't have chosen 8. Like they were very reluctant. So again, it's not them being like, we need more championships. Really, however, 8 championships doesn't feel that out of place now that I'm seeing like what the state championships could be. Remember,
awesome that some of these schools are going to get
football champions for a solid 20 years when we had about 100 fewer schools. Okay, because we started this back in 2002, I think. We had about 300 something schools. We have about 460 right now. So we've added, whether it's new schools being built, there's been a ton since about the start of the 2000s. A ton of charter schools added. A lot of these charter schools have grown and grown. They've got football themselves. So as a whole, whether you play football or not, we have probably 100 more members of the association. And yeah, it kind of does make sense. We have 8 state champions for all these different schools.
It's gonna be really cool to see some of these schools win state championships that they otherwise would not have won if they were still in 4A or 3A or something like that, stuck behind some of the traditional powerhouses across the state.
Yeah, the thing is, like the teams that are winning state titles this year, I'm looking at girls tennis. Carborough is a good example there. I think in 4A, like it's going to be them and Lake Norman Charter. Lake Norman Charter had a congested run in 3A, but they were able to break through and fall to Terry Sanford. Carborough in 3A East, same thing, came up against Terry Sanford a few times. But now, like, that's a state championship worthy team for the school size that they are. It's not an illegitimate title in any way. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, we're talking about teams that used to make it to regional, like they used to make the 4th round or the 5th round, are now making it to state championship. We're not saying these teams that used to lose in the 2nd round are going to win state championships.
Yeah.
That's what I think some people are making it out to be. That are making out the 8 championships in all these sports just means that a bunch of nobodies are now walking home with championships that don't really deserve it. That's not it at all. It is these teams, again, used to have had solid programs for years and deep playoff runs for years, and now they go and they get to be on that stage, and they are worthy of being on that stage because now they are only against schools that are within the same ballpark of students that they have.
We're going to transition here from the funds that the NCHSAA is accruing and being able to put that towards venues. Another very hot subject was the fact that the NCHSAA did announce its state championship venues for the fall, all of them for all sports. And again, it drew a lot of mixed opinions and thoughts. The ones that I don't think were contested much were tennis and golf. Tennis remains at Burlington Tennis Center, Cary Tennis Center, Ting Park, and Millbrook Exchange Park. It's always been that way, and the tennis coaches want it that way, and that's exactly how it is. Golf, obviously, you have to find multiple courses to be able to conduct state championships at. They're going to be going down to Monroe, where they've been in the past. They're going to be going to Fayetteville for some of the smaller classifications. Again, that is a location that they've been in the past. They're going to Lexington, I believe, for one of their state titles, and then the rest are down in the Southern Pines, Pinehurst area, including Pinehurst number 6. All of those check out. I don't think there's any contention there. I think it's really cool what they've been able to do with the volleyball state championships. It's always been at Reynolds Coliseum over the last couple of years, and they've added, having to go to that Friday, they've added Lawrence Joel Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Winston-Salem, which is not the home of Wake Forest volleyball, but it is a venue on Wake Forest campus that is large enough to host the crowds that are expected for high school games. But really cool that 2 ACC schools are getting to host that. But the one that really got people going, football. They remain at Kenan Stadium in Chapel Hill. They're going to go to Durham County Memorial Stadium, where the lacrosse state championships have been held. And I know some people are like, what even is the Durham County Memorial Stadium? It has a really nice capacity for a state championship. And then they have Moretz Stadium in Hickory, North Carolina, the home of Lenore Rhine. And that one really got people going. But if you watch the HighSchoolOT postgame show on Friday night, we talked to Jeff Link and David Jones from Scoreboard Radio. They're out in the Catawba Valley. They're so amped about having this. The whole community there loves the fact that Lenore Rhine is going to get to host a football championship. And I think it's going to be an awesome, awesome environment for the couple of games that they do get out there in Hickory. I think it's going to be really cool. You also have to keep in mind here, yes, the NCHSAA has not announced what classifications are going to what venues. If you are an 8A football team in the state of North Carolina, they're not going to stick you in a little tiny stadium. Like, let's be real here. If you are a really big school with a really big fan base that is going to travel to these games, you're probably going to be in Kenan Stadium. Mm-hmm. Like, let's be very real here. And if you are a really small school that no matter how passionate you are, your fan bases can't compete with the 6 and 7A fan bases, you're going to be in one of those smaller venues, and it's going to feel a lot more intimate and cozy, and it's going to feel a lot better as a state championship environment, opposed to being in something like Kenan Stadium, where it all of a sudden turns into a cave when you have the 1A football state championships there, and there's a couple thousand people, and there's not really a good environment down on the field because everybody's so far away from you, and there's not a ton of people there in comparison to the capacity of the stadium. Now we're going to put you somewhere where that fits and that's cozy, and I think it's going to be a better experience for people. And then you get, I mentioned this Friday, we've gotten the people who say, hey, my favorite Division I school near me is this school. Why isn't it there? I've heard ECU. I've heard UNC Charlotte. I've heard NC State. We can talk about Carter Finley in a little bit, because I think that's a big question people have had, is like, oh, Carter Finley's hosted it forever. Dave Doran loves having it there. Why isn't NC State hosting? There's a lot of reasons, actually. Duke isn't hosting, and they've hosted in the past. Wake Forest isn't hosting. Trust me, I've heard every Division I college thrown out there. Why are we going to a D2? Why are we going to Durham County Memorial Stadium? And what is your take on all of this, J. Mike? Because I can get on a soapbox here, and I think I will.
I can get on like 5 soapboxes. I'm just trying to figure out which one I need to climb up on top first. So I think I'm going to go with this one, Evan. All you people have been doing for years, and you know who you are, always in the comments saying this stadium's too big. This stadium's too big. You got your wish, and now you're complaining that's the wrong smaller stadium. Give me a break. Give me a break. This is all you've been asking for years. These stadiums are too big. You don't actually go to the state championships. I don't see you there. You're just complaining from your couch, looking at our stories, looking at our highlights from Carter Finley or Kenan Stadium. And you're like, this is not a good place for a state championship. You haven't gone to a state championship. If your school makes it to a state championship, have you even driven to a game? You should. But a lot of people have really strong opinions who don't actually go to these things. That's the first thing. Number 2, we'll see how it plays out. You small stadium supporters, we'll see. Maybe you're right. I will be at Moret Stadium. I don't care what day it's on. I hope it's on Saturday. It'd be easier for me. But I will be there because I want to see what it looks like in a smaller stadium. I've only seen state championships at the Big Four: Wake Forest, Duke, Carolina, and State. I want to see what it looks like, and so I can compare. And so I can just determine which team I'm on here, big stadium or little stadium. Because all I know is when people are complaining, they do not think about the student athletes. And I do. If I'm a student athlete, if I'm a high school football player, and you tell me you can be at Carter Finley Stadium or another stadium, I'm thinking, I want the ACC one. I want the ACC stadium first. Nothing against the others. But if I'm choosing ACC stadium number 1, if the Carolina Panthers, which we know from us going down to Charlotte for a few high school events, we know the Panthers have been trying to kind of get more involved in high school sports. If the Panthers get involved, if I'm a high school football player, I'm saying yes. Number 1, I want to go play at the NFL stadium. Mom, Dad, go drive. Like, I know it's far away from home, maybe, depending on which school you are. If you're in the Charlotte area, it's not a bad drive. But let's go. Let's go. I wanted to experience what's being in that locker room is like. Like Texas has theirs in all the Dallas Cowboys facility, not just AT&T Stadium, but the other facilities there. And it's wonderful for those players. But people don't think about the players. So I want to see, is playing in a smaller stadium with potentially a packed environment, how does that feel? How does that compare? And whether or not it's worth it. Because I tell you, when you're on the sideline at Carter Finley and at Kenan Stadium, when you're looking up in the stands, you don't see the empty seats. And you don't think about how, boy, this place looks empty. Not when it's your team. Not when you are in the heat of the moment. Not when you're playing. You're looking up and saying, wow, look how many, oh, wow, I can see so many of my high school classmates, because they're sitting so much closer to me than they would be at a high school game where you have the track in between and all that stuff, right? So you're actually more aware of how many more people there are at those places because they're closer to you, and you just kind of look at the crowd like, oh my gosh. As I've seen huge crowds. Okay, Bunn brought a ton of people. Basically, a whole lower side was fully seated when Bunn made their first and only state championship appearance, and when Cardinal Gibbons made their, I think it was third.
Remember Clinton a couple years ago?
Clinton, oh yes, absolutely. They brought the whole town and then some years, but maybe this is an opportunity that we kind of get what Garner experienced back in 1987, the thing that's still talked about forever and ever. They had a game at Memorial Stadium in Charlotte. The entire town goes to Charlotte to play West Charlotte and wins that game. So maybe we'll have moments like that. I don't know, but that's my soapbox for this. Okay, small stadium fans, Let's see how it works out.
Also, the NCHSAA had to be very strategic about this because you can complain about the association all that you want. You can think they're these big evil people that are out to get you and your favorite school. But what they did learn in 2023 is that they cannot be equitable in terms of choosing who goes to what venues. Instead, they have to be very strategic about who goes to what venues, because the 2023 basketball regionals were a mess. They put them in venues that could not hold, they put them in high school venues that could not hold the capacity. So now the NCHSAA has to be very strategic about the teams that it puts in Hickory and it puts in Durham and it puts in Chapel Hill in order to make this work. And we're going to see. We're going to see if this is the right thing. The NCHSAA is also not stupid. They know how many people have attended the last couple of state championships. They didn't just throw a dart at a board and say, cool, we're going to Lenoir-Rhyne. No, they probably sat down and said, okay, our 1A, 2A, and 3A state championships draw this many people. We're projecting that this year's are going to draw this many people. What is a threshold that we can get into where we think it's going to be that crowd? Are some schools going to bring more than the others? Of course they are. I'll also say this. Another soapbox here.
There's a lot we can get into.
Venues nowadays, we're in the big 2025. Venues now are not clamoring to host state championships. It does not have the same economic impact that it has had on an area in the past. North Carolina has grown immensely in the last 2 decades. So we're talking about the fact that it is not going to be this wild, rush in the economy because you're hosting a state title. Now, you know what? I saw some people who are like, man, when is the NCHSAA going to bring something down to Charlotte? You know what? J. Mike had a column. We mentioned this a couple episodes ago. J. Mike is never wrong. He's just early sometimes to things and people don't realize it. Maybe this year teaches us that the NCHSAA needs to go to more of a bidding style where it's like the Final Four, where your local sports commission or sports council can go out and put out a bid to host more state championships. So you want that state title game to be played at ECU, even though Greenville is so far out east compared to everybody else. Then go bid on it. Bid. If you're down in Charlotte and you just really want there to be a state title at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, again, not a centralized location, bid on it. Go do it. But I will say this. In a past life, I've been on the other side of this, J. Mike. Yeah. I have worked in a previous role at a previous job. I have worked at a venue that hosted NCHSAA state championships. It was right before COVID. So from 2016 to 2019, I was able to be a part of NCHSAA state titles from a venue host standpoint. And I'm going to be real honest with you. It sucked and it was not fun. And nobody in our office wanted to work on days that we would typically have off on a weekend. And we did not want to go stand around for 15 hours, like working a high school sporting event that we had no interest in. And it was all hands on deck, having to run parking and concessions and run tickets and, run the video board and all of this stuff. It sucked. We did not want to do it. And I was probably the only person in our office that cared because I had passion for high school sports and I actually knew the teams that were involved. But all of my coworkers, it was the worst day of the year was to host the NCHSAA state championships because you're not getting paid extra. You're having to work on a day off. And you know what you're doing at work? You're having a bunch of charged up and passionate high school fans yelling at you all day, yelling at you over parking, yelling at you over concessions, yelling at you over the weather, yelling at you over where to go. And it was zero fun. Now, the NCHSAA has gotten a lot better, and I feel like post-COVID, the NCHSAA has done a phenomenal job leaning more into its host schools. We've seen these host schools be able to bring a lot more to the table. I think about when the soccer state championships were down in Matthews at the Sportsplex. Butler High School did a great job running tickets and making sure everything ran properly in the press box and really being accommodating and helping out the staff at the Sportsplex, who, quite frankly, is not a big staff that can take on a state championship. So these schools being able to come in and help definitely has helped over the last 5 years of the NCHSAA being able to properly staff the right personnel to put on a state championship. That way it takes more off of the venues. I also think about Davie County's volleyball program has done a phenomenal job over the last couple of seasons helping run the volleyball state championships at Reynolds, whether that's running press conferences, taking teams to their locker rooms, all of that. So the NCHSAA has definitely made an improvement there. but they don't have the personnel where they can come into every venue and fully staff it. That way the venue staff has nothing on their plate. It's a huge lift for the venue staff to be able to help put on a state championship in conjunction with the NCHSAA. And there's a certain price there. And there's this, at some point, some of these venues are like, it's not worth it. Or in the case of Carter Finley Stadium, there's an NC State basketball game on that Saturday. They're doing renovations and construction right at the end of NC State's football season to improve that area around PNC and Carter Finley, and that starts in the winter. There's a lot of different factors that go into that, and one of which is some of these schools, this is one of the days of the college football playoff. So some of these schools who, yes, on October 19th, they don't have those aspirations anymore. But at the beginning of the season, when these negotiations were going on, they did. That's another factor in all of this. So there's a lot here. It's not just the NCHSAA covering their eyes and throwing a dart at a board and saying, cool, we're going to Durham County Memorial Stadium.
All right. A few things. This is my second soapbox plus history lesson. But first, I just wanted to remind folks, what did you think was going to happen when we went to A classifications? Did you think it was going to be easier to find venues?
This is better than going to high schools. We could have so easily gone back to the COVID days and gone and played basketball state championships in Randolph County or something like that. We could have done that. We could have gone and played in baseball in Cumberland County like there wasn't COVID. And was that a bad thing? No. But could it accommodate these crowds? We saw in 2023 that it couldn't.
Right. So, like, this
they
actually
did a great job. They found good
We're
venues.
not going to high schools for anything. That's huge, right? That's a huge win. Like 2023 regionals showed us a few things. It showed us, number one, a lot of places don't want to host anymore. Actually, basketball regionals before that, everyone thinks that people are clamoring for high school events, and they're not, especially if they're only one day, which they have been in the past. The old regional format that was like Tuesday through Saturday, that was kind of lucrative.
Long live the Crown Coliseum.
The Crown Coliseum, Crown Arena, and the East.
Even
regionals.
Hickory, Lenore Ryan got to host those, and the community loved it.
And then outgrew Lenore Ryan and the Catawba Valley Community College. So they had to go somewhere else. Well, then the high schools were hey, if you want to host the high school and you have the high school regional championship and you have a basketball arena big enough, we can do it. There was the association posted all the venues that have agreed to host. It was 6 schools in the entire state. And 2 of them were out in the mountains. Okay, it was AC Reynolds and McDowell. And then it was Providence and Charlotte. And then or was
Lee
it
County?
Charlotte? Yeah,
yep.
Lee County,
South Garner,
Johnston, and I forget the 6th one. South Garner. And it's just like, clearly you guys don't understand. Like, if I think about this, about like hosting, I don't want to sign up to host somebody else's state championship and have everyone yell at me when I'm like, keep your students off the field, and then they're like mad at me. That's a tough ask. But here's my history lesson here. How does this work? How do you determine where you're going to host championships? And again, I wrote the thing years ago saying other states let communities, cities bid for them. So that way the association is only receiving money and then putting their venue there and then working out minor details. They don't do that here in North Carolina because the association has, and this is a good thing, it's not a bad thing, they have a working relationship with so many people that they can pick up the phone and say, hey, here's, what if we did X many days? Or someone can pick up the phone and call the association and say, got an idea for you. What if you did 3 days here? Like, I'm sure the Guilford College hosting soccer probably had a lot to do with someone in Greensboro saying, we love to host high school stuff. We have a turf field and you're hosting 8 championships in boys soccer. We're in the centralized location in the state. You can host all 8 here on a turf field, and we have a decent number of seating. And I don't know about the parking at Guilford, how that works, but let's say the parking's good. You have to think about parking too. Some people want to sign up to like, you should let all these places host it, and the parking's terrible, or the parking doesn't work on a school day, and maybe it's.
Wait till people complain about Bank of America Stadium parking.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to kind of work out these things and ahead of time. And the association is trying to figure out what's good for the athletes and also what doesn't break the bank. And so sometimes they can't get on the same page with some venues because it would break the bank, or they can't get on the same page because, like, thank you, but we have working relationships with these two. I mean, credit to Dave Tepper, as soon as he bought the Panthers, they were talking about hosting high school championships. It hasn't happened yet. Okay. But we know that they continue to host high school events, and there's a desire there. And hopefully it works out. But I guarantee if you went to a bidding style, no one's competing with Tepper money. They can host as much stuff as they want to because they're just paying for it. But the thing is, it has to be him. And previously, the city of Charlotte, like you said, they've raised their profile in the last 25 years. They're trying to host NBA All-Star games and NFL drafts, and throw their hat. They hosted a Democrat national convention and a Republican national convention. That's the level of economic impact they're looking for, not state championships. And that's, again, like they're bigger and better stuff that they're trying. That the people who are tasked with bringing events to Charlotte, that's what is on their table. Hickory's always looking to host stuff, hence Lenoir-Rhyne. Durham's always looking to host, hence Durham County Stadium. And then, of course, Carolina and State generally have always said we'd love to get people on our campus as much as we can, hence football there, even though State is missing it for football this year. They're still hosting volleyball.
Also,
So,
geographic lesson here.
Mhm.
Everybody just, when they point to state championship venues, everybody says, we all got to go to Raleigh. State championships have never been more centralized than they are now, with an influx of the venues being more triad based.
Yeah.
From Durham to Winston-Salem, if you take that and you just draw straight lines down, that's the center of the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
So Durham, Burlington, Greensboro, Winston-Salem.
Yeah.
No matter where you put a state championship, it's going to be a far travel for somebody, but that is central to the state of North Carolina. So Raleigh may have been better to you in the past.
That we complain about it not being in Raleigh. We do have people in the media who think, oh, if it's not in Raleigh, I know High School T is going to complain. No, first of all, we traveled the whole state all season long anyway. So no, like driving to Winston-Salem a few times a week is not a heavy lift for us. Like we're not the ones complaining about travel ever. But yes, like it's going into much more centralized. It's been good. And here's my prediction about if you're concerned about the travel to Lenoir-Rhyne, let me remind you that the 4A East could very well include Salisbury. Like that's East in 4A because there's not most of 4A schools are like Brevard and RS Central and all these schools in the 828 and then get on the 704 area code. Then you kind of get the Davidson County and that's East now. So do not be surprised if that's the one, because you may not have, unless like First Flight or someone like that, emerges in 4A East going all the way to Hickory. So if they host 2 games at Lenoir-Rhyne, it will not be a heavy lift for the East champion. I guarantee, because they're going to be East champions.
The westernmost East champions are probably going to play in Hickory.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. Just like I think one year in the old football brackets, I think the last year we had subdivided. North Davidson plays Salisbury in a state championship, and North Davidson and Salisbury are like a couple miles apart. So like obviously that would have been a perfect game for Hickory or Wake Forest or what have you. But like it'll be fine, folks. And then I think Matthews was a great host for soccer. But I do understand. I think the Guilford turf field probably was a big factor at play there. I also
the field at the Sportsplex in Matthews was massive.
Yeah, and that was actually kind of cool because a lot of goals in the second half of like every boys and girls soccer championship while I was there. It also had great parking, and when they used to have those soccer championships here in the Triangle at Wake Med.
It was awful at NC State.
NC State did not see it enough. Like you have to think about all these things too, right? So like I think we've been pretty fair here at HighSchoolOT. We don't want everything in our backyard. We want what's best for the student athletes, but we also know there are some logistical things you have to care about. So we'll see how these new venues work. But for everyone belly aching about like where they are and oh my gosh, like this, wrap your head around it and embrace it, man. And we'll see how like at the end of when we're done with all this, what the true impact is. I do think going to a venue 3 times, and we had this question right in the off season. 8 championships. Do you go 4 at one site and 4 at the other on the same day? Or do you try to spread it out Thursday, Friday, Saturday? And we talked about that. That's better for a venue. That's better for a host. If they're going to have to put all this work into it, at least have a few days. You might get some people, in the local economy spending in hotel rooms and restaurants and things like that. That's why the wrestling championships never move from the Greensboro Coliseum, because people stay the night and book hotel rooms and go out to eat right there near the Coliseum Thursday through Saturday.
That's going to be cold this year with the hockey rink now down.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely will be. But like that is
wrestling on ice.
But now everyone gets that opportunity to bring people to their campus or facility multiple days. And I think it's, I'm not going to say it's going to be awesome until I see what the venue looks like at Guilford College. I'm a little worried about the parking. I have no basis. I have no idea what we're getting into there. I hope the seats enough. But and also with Wake Forest on Friday in volleyball, how's that going to work? Are there enough school systems that are out on that day? I am told that a lot of public schools are not in school that day. Are they going to travel there? Because in the past we have not. I will say this: volleyball championships should have a lot more fans for some of those titles over the last few years that have not. Whether it was the time of day or traveling to Reynolds, whatever it was, it dissuaded some Western schools, not the ones in the mountains that are super passionate, but some of those out of the Charlotte area not coming to Raleigh to support their team. Maybe putting those titles in Winston-Salem helps that a little bit. We'll see. But again, someone has to want to host. You can't just say put it at the school. Someone has to want to host, and then they have to work it out, and it has to be logical, has to be reasonable for the association to sign off on it. And look, if the NCHSAA ever wants to take up my idea, you can give me just a little bit of credit. Putting out the bid would probably be easier for them. Then they're not the bad guy, and they're just probably making a lot more money as well.
So I'm looking at Guilford College right now.
Yeah.
Stadium definitely looks like it is going to be packed out. They also have berm, so people can bring their lawn chairs or bring a towel and a blanket and sit on the grass there on the hill. But it definitely looks as cozy as the one side of the Matthews Sportsplex looked. And so, yes, there's going to be they're not going to reach capacity where they're denying entry, but I feel like, I feel like the stands are going to be full, which is something that, again, to your point, looks really cool when you're a student athlete and you look up and you just see everybody there. It is a very cool feeling. It looks like capacity wise, it's something in between the Bryan Soccer Park or McPherson Stadium, excuse me, where in Brown Summit, where state championships had been the last couple of years. And then it's bigger than that, maybe not as large of capacity as the Sportsplex, but also parking wise, like it's okay.
Yeah. The only thing wrong with Bryan Park or McPherson Stadium was that you couldn't. There was a few facility things where like the PA system was a little hard to hear. It kind of had a short in it, and the playing surface was kind of rough particularly for the boys.
Yep, that time of year.
Yeah. Whereas like the Matthews Sportsplex was impeccable, and now you're moving to turf, so it takes that out of the equation entirely. But it will be for some of the smaller classifications, like 4A. Some of those schools who are going to make it this year may have not played on turf all year, so that'll be interesting as well.
There's a lot coming on HighSchoolOT over the next couple of weeks involving state championships. We have NCISA golf championships beginning on Monday and Tuesday. NCISA cross country is on Friday. Saturday is all of NCISA minus football. They're all going to be played, and then we'll have NCHSAA state championships beginning, I believe, in 2 weeks with golf, and then we have some tennis next weekend. So lots of exciting action coming and lots of coverage on HighSchoolOT. We will be plenty busy trying to somehow, some way get to as many of these venues as possible and continue to tell that story. If you want to see more on HighSchoolOT involving our playoff coverage, you can do that. But that'll do it for this week's episode of the HighSchoolOT Press Box. We thank you for tuning in. For Evan Moesta and J. Mike Blake, have a happy week.